Hello, and welcome back to another weekly installment of Pondering. My name is Tyler Neffield, and today it might be a little different for you guys because we don't have Ben today. So a little background story. Ben is going to be leaving. I actually just said goodbye like an hour or so before I recorded this to him, and he is going to be leaving. You're going to be listening to this on Thursday, and he's going to be leaving on Sunday. So that does not mean it's not over for the both of us. We talked about this in an episode previously about like what we've been up to and everything, and how the podcast will still continue. So it's still going to continue, but our lives get a little bit busy, so we kind of had the idea of what if we did episodes that were just us, meaning just individual episodes. That's what I like to call them. We will still have episodes where we both are on together, maybe something on Zoom where you can see our faces. That is still to be determined, but as of right now, this is going to be a single episode of just me talking. So if you're new here, my name is Tyler Neffield, and Ben will eventually have an episode by himself. But today we're going to be talking about social media. Now before we get into it, we have some things to go over. First off, I'm recording on my new MacBook. Yes, if you know me, I am always a Windows person, but I switched to Mac because I really wanted one, and it works better. And in my opinion, I think the audio's better. I don't know. Spotify listeners, YouTube listeners, Apple Podcast listeners, let us know if you think the audio's better. I think it is. Also, we have some recent news. And I think this goes along very well with the social media today. And that is Taylor Swift actually canceled 3 of her concerts in Vienna. Now, some background is that I believe 2 suspected terrorists were arrested. They were planning some sort of terroristic activity at this concert. And if you know what a Taylor Swift concert is all about, there are sometimes hundreds of thousands of people at these concerts. So, yeah. When I first heard the news, I didn't know, or she didn't announce that she was canceling it yet, but they announced they arrested the people, and a few hours later, they said that she canceled it. In my opinion, I think that was a very good idea. I think people wouldn't have went. I feel like I wouldn't have went if I knew that was going down, because you really don't know how many people are involved in these situations. So that's a bit scary. But yes, I heard it off of social media, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, social media. So before we get into all of the questions we're going to talk about today, we are going to just go over some very basic answers to common questions. So, I'm using the website sproutsocial.com. 54 answers to the most common social media questions. We're going to go over a few of the first ones just to get some basics down before we start talking more. So, general questions. How many people are on social media? As of January 2024, this article was written in April 2024, so fairly recent. A total of 5.04 billion people around the world use social media. So, that puts the worldwide social media penetration rate at 62%. I don't know what I thought the number was going to be, but 62% seems rather low. But I guess you also have to take into account maybe like third world countries that don't have access to that. Moving on. What is the most popular social media platform? Facebook. It continues to be the most popular social media platform. Has 3 billion monthly active users. That makes a lot of sense. Um, I think for social media, Facebook is so big because it was one of the first ones. Um, and also most adults use it now, and compared to Snapchat or something else, adults seem to always be using Facebook. Now, interesting enough, I actually do use Facebook, and I never really thought I would ever use Facebook, but I started using it in the past few months because of the musical I was in, and pretty much everybody had Facebook in the musical, so we had like a group message that we would send out stuff on Facebook, and I pretty much had to learn how to use it. And that took a while for me, but eventually I figured out how to use it, and now I'm a pro. Also, I'm holding my mic a little bit further away from my face. It's interesting, like when recording with Ben in person, our mics are a little bit like further away from us. So, and I'm just kind of like lounging around. Because if you noticed already, this is audio only because I feel like there's no point in having video. So my mic is a little bit further away from my face because I'm still getting used to that, not talking right into the microphone, because I have to remember these are over $100 microphones, so they're very nice. So I hope the audio is still good. Anyways, moving on. How long does the average person spend on social media per day? The average person spends around 2 hours, 23 minutes. I feel like that's low. I don't know about you, but I feel like that's rather low. I know a lot of people that spend way more time than that. I probably spend more time than that. But I guess I also have to take into account that social media usage here in this case is simply social media, and it's not so much just screen time in general, which I feel like is quite large for me, especially when I'm home for the summer. But we'll look into all that later. Okay, moving on. What's the best time to post on social media? This is an interesting question on this website, and I want to talk about it. So it says, the best time to post on social media depends on several factors. While your choice of platform and your industry both matter, your audience activity plays the biggest role. You should look at your post performances to get valuable data about the perfect post timing for your business. Now, it's interesting because they are talking about it from a business perspective. From a perspective of, I'm posting on Instagram to, I don't know, just maybe personal photos of me. I don't know if there's a really good time to post. I think during the summer, maybe you'll get more views or likes because people are home from school. But other than that, I don't know if there's a correct time to post. I think you just need to post whatever time you want. All right, moving on. We'll do a few more of these. I don't really see any questions I like. All right, actually, we're going to get right into the other deeper questions because I don't really like any of the other questions posted there. Okay. Now, we've all probably debated these questions in our heads before, but we're going to talk about them a little more in depth now. So, the first question here is, what is my most commonly used social media app? So, to no one's surprise, clap if you're surprised. I don't hear anything. My most commonly used social media app is TikTok. I go on TikTok quite a bit, but here's my ideology behind it. I don't really spend an unhealthy amount of time. I feel like I used to spend more of an unhealthy amount of time, but now I always make sure before I close the app that I learned something. Now, whether that something might be something educational that I can put towards school, or maybe something, I don't know, like a new song, something like that. I always make sure I learn something. And that is why I also love TikTok so much, because it really does keep you up to par with everything that's going on in the world, in life, whatever. And I think we'll get into that a little bit later about how it kind of keeps you going with the rest of the world. Next question. When should kids be introduced to social media? At what age? Why at that age? Now, funny enough, I think we've actually talked about this question, Ben and I, on an episode before. Can't remember what episode. We've had quite a bit at this point. But I think we agreed that around 12 years old, whether that child is going into middle school or, as Ben and I were in our high school, we went into a school that was 7 through 12 and they had a junior high. But regardless, I think going into middle school and or high school, absolutely you need a phone. I think especially now at this age, it's important. I like to think that a lot of us 2004 babies were a bit of a trial run for parents, because they never had to deal with that with their parents. They never, knew when they were going to get a phone, or, when their parents, because they didn't have that back then. So it was something new. And it's not like the internet was really saying this is when you should give your child a cell phone, because they were so new at the time. But I got mine when I was 12 years old. I was going into 6th grade. I think it was an absolute perfect time to get it, because I actually used it for good things, like my parents picking me up from musical rehearsal early and I needed to call them. Or there was a school paper we had and I did a lot of pictures for that, and I used my phone for that. And it was really, really beneficial at the time, and I couldn't be more happier than when I got it, because it was seriously a perfect time. So I would conclude, at what age? 12 years old. I think that's a good age. Maybe 12 going on to 13 for somebody's 13th birthday, just depending on, when they were born, what grade they were in. But I think, when you're a teenager, that's a good point. Why at that age? I think simply because not only of the kids around them, but also them going into school. Also, a reminder that, to be fair, like, other kids are probably going to have it, and you don't want to be left out. I was fortunate enough to never be left out, because I was probably like the second group of kids to get a phone. I know some people I can think of off the top of my head that had a phone early, and they were fine. They were like, oh, that was cool, but like they didn't really have many people to talk to, because they were like the first batch of people to get a phone. And then I like to say I'm part of the second. All right. How much time is wasted on social media? Now, we already talked about the average user spends 2 hours, 23 minutes on social media. However, I think this question is a bit selective. It says, how much time is wasted on social media? I think we need to think about this question a little bit deeper in what the word wasted means. Because, like I said about my TikTok, I don't get off really until like I'm like, oh yeah, like if I just like brain rot on there, I think that's a waste. Unless I really need the brain rot for like my health. But I think, for example, we'll put it this way. I run 2 other Instagram accounts on along with my own personal. So I have my personal Instagram. I have this Instagram, Pondering. And then I also have my Lego account that I run. Not as much. So I run those. But if I'm doing stuff on there, not so much scrolling, but I don't know, maybe like reposting stuff or finding stuff to post, that is still time accumulated on it. But I'm not necessarily wasting it because maybe I'm working on a post or something like that. So I think for me, I make sure that I'm not wasting time on stuff. I think there are times when I'm on Instagram or TikTok actually wasting time and maybe procrastinating from a task. And I think that's when it gets really, really bad because nobody wants to procrastinate. And I think it's important to manage procrastination. I think the best ways to do it are, setting limits on your social media apps. That's always good. But the thing is, you like lock it with the password. And if you know the password, you're not going to care if you go in and unlock it after your time is up. So I think it's best if you really need some assistance in time spent on social media. I think it's best to simply get somebody you know and tell them to make up a password for you. And then they, will hopefully not tell you if you want to get back on social media after that time limit. So I think that's a good way to always keep your time in check if you're spending a lot of time on social media and procrastinating from other tasks you could be doing. Moving on to the next question. Do you have online friendships or relationships with people you've never met in real life? This is kind of a scary question first because it is scary to think about. Like, you can get in contact so easily with somebody you've never met on social media, especially Snapchat. Also, like dating apps like Tinder, Bumble, all that stuff. I don't use dating apps because I just want to be in the real world. But Snapchat, I've met a few people on there through like, oh, like this person, I know this person, but I've always really ended up meeting that person at some point because yeah, we just like know the same people and we end up like talking, conversing, and then maybe we'll hang out in a group or something like that. So I can't say I've ever like actively engaged a friend or a friendship that I've like never met still. But yeah, it's very scary to think about that there's people out there that meet people that they've never met and they talk to them online. Next question kind of goes hand in hand with this one. How would you stay in touch with your friends without social media? This question. Honestly, I wish I had a guest on this podcast or somebody I could talk to because thinking back to, for example, my parents' time, you really didn't know when you were going to talk to a person next. And something about that kind of makes me like, I love that. Like, you really don't know. But because unless, like, let's say, you had friends that went off to other colleges and stuff, you couldn't get in contact with them unless maybe your dorm and or apartment or house at that college had, a landline or something like that. You really couldn't get in contact with them. And I think about that. I'm like, wow, that's crazy to think because now, I have so many goodbyes to say with people. And, it's so sad to say goodbyes, but I have to remember that they post on Instagram, Snap about what they're doing so I can see, how they're doing in life. I can call them anytime I want, text them anytime I want. It is so easy to stay in touch with people if you have an effort that you give. But I think social media absolutely, in the end, makes it easier to stay in touch with friends and family. FaceTime, that's been around for a good while, and that was huge. Like, talking to one person on the phone, that has been around for a while, even if it was landlines or house phones, something like that, right? But actually talking to somebody face to face, that's pretty crazy to think that technology has given that to so many people who might never have had it. I think that's all I have to say about that. I think it is such a benefit to everybody that happens. And I'm so thankful that I can still stay in touch with a lot of my friends, especially, for example, Ben. We've talked about how he's going to Florida, but guess what? I can call him anytime I want, and I can text him anytime I want. Next question. Have you ever gotten angry at someone on social media, and why? I've gotten angry at certain people, but that is in the next question, so I'm going to save that. I'm going to use this as a place to be like, yes, I've gotten angry at people, but those people I don't often know. And I'm going to put this question in the context that I don't know the person I'm getting mad at, because the next question is more of like a personal friendship disagreement. So, have I gotten angry on TikTok at somebody I don't know? Absolutely. Because TikTok is honestly the main source of where I would get mad at someone, I think. And I say this not at like mad, but maybe like just gives me a negative, uncomfy feeling. For example, like I see somebody maybe talking bad about somebody else, or just maybe say something that's not quite appropriate and it's just like degrading to somebody else. I think I won't get mad at them, but it gives you a feeling of like, oh, like that person's kind of terrible. That's an awful person. But I think just because I don't know them, it's not as deep per se. Sorry, I need to put lotion on my hands. My hands are so incredibly dry. Yeah. So moving on to kind of the second part of this question, I like to say, have you lost friendships over things said and done on social media? I don't think I've per se lost a friendship. I know people who have. They've, gotten to fights about something that was posted, but it's such an interesting question, because I think I've gotten angry at people for things they post, because sometimes there's just no place for it. Like maybe making an angry rant on their private story on Snap about something that happened, I don't know, politically in the world or religiously, and things you never talk about at the dinner table: money, religion, politics. But social media, people really like to express themselves, and I think I've gotten angry at friends because sometimes there's just really no place for that on social media, especially Snapchat. But also, like, I get it, and maybe I'd post something, but like not an angry rant. I think it's a mechanism that they do when they don't really have anybody to talk about it with, so they just rant on social media. Now, changing this question a little bit around, have I lost any relationships over anything that's been said or done on social media? I haven't lost any relationships over it, but there has been a lot of aftermath that occurred on social media, and I'm not going to go into it too much, but there's been things that have been said, posted about me on TikTok, Snap, after relationship that the person posted that's quite literally cyberbullying, but that sucks, and I don't really have too much to say on that other than, like, that's what happened, and that's a very big downside of it, and it really sucks because there's not really much you can do. But at the time I was surrounded by a lot of good people that weren't going to trust what they were seeing on social media because they know me. Yeah. So I think social media can really affect the aftermath of things that happen and actually worsen a lot of the stuff because people don't really think about what they're posting until after they posted it. And that's where it gets bad. All right, we're getting to the last bit of questions here. This one says, do you like things, like is in quotation marks, do you like things you don't actually like simply from the influence of social media? Absolutely. And this is all of the product of consumerism and influence of influencers, really. I think TikTok is a big factor of this, where I will see maybe somebody like reviewing a product on TikTok and they talk about how great it is, and they're so great at their job that they actually convince me that I want and need the product and maybe even like the product. And if I buy it, I'm like, oh, I don't know how I actually felt about this. And a good example of this is I bought a new case for my iPad last year, or this past year really, and the case had a keyboard. And I was like, man, like I think this is going to be really, really useful for a lot of the stuff I do. And I watched some reviews on it, had like a little mouse pad and everything, and I was like, yeah. And I got it, and I was just like, oh, I think I was just convinced online that this was way too good. So I sent it back because Amazon offers returns. But I think that's a good example of something that I saw and I was like, yeah, I want that. I need that. Did I need it? No. Maybe I wanted it in the moment, but I didn't need it. So I think social media does easily have that power to influence people to like something they actually don't like and convince them and sway their opinions in ways that they wouldn't have been swayed otherwise. But that's kind of also like what keeps social media the way it is, swaying opinions. Because if we didn't have that, there wouldn't be social media. Next question. Actually, no, I want to talk one more thing about that. So social media's impact on consumer behavior, I think, is really important to note as well, because the consumer can actually fund that influencer's life, really. I mentioned about TikTok and also TikTok Shop, where if you buy something, oftentimes you benefit the creator that you see the video from, and sometimes it'll have like a little thing like, I can't remember what it is right now, but it'll say like this benefits the creator essentially. And so it can also be a source of income for a lot of people, and I think a lot of people rely on this consumerism from us to pay the bills, because if they have a good way of influencing somebody to buy it, which no different than a salesman, except it's an online virtual salesman. But if they have good sales capabilities, then they can easily sway the public to buy things, and therefore they make more money. All right, second to last question, and these are last two. I saved them for last because I think they could be the most impactful. And also, I think they are probably the two most easily talked about questions. Is deleting social media good or bad? Well, this question is interesting because I'm sure a lot of people have thought about it, or at least thought about deleting one app, including me. Is deleting social media good? Let's look at the pros first. You don't have that drama of online maybe getting upset by negative videos or negative posts. You decrease your screen time. Maybe you're more productive in other areas of your life. Maybe you read a book. I could probably say that this would benefit me because I currently have a book sitting on my desk, Happy Place by Emily Henry, and it is not finished yet, and I need to finish it. And I have a bad habit of not reading when I'm not at the beach. So, I think that would benefit me. I think those are fairly good benefits. Now, looking at the cons, you might not be up to date with everything happening. I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast about the Taylor Swift debacle with the potential terrorist attack. And I think that is a prime example of, unless I watched the news or maybe talked to a friend in person, I wouldn't have found out about that if it wasn't for social media. And I think not having social media also gives you a bit slow on the uptake, especially if you're out with friends and they're like, hey, did you see about this? And you're like, no, I didn't. But then again, you also think about maybe it does spark a topic for conversation where you can be like, no, I didn't see this. I don't have social media. Like, tell me about it. And then they tell it to you. And you also have a greater chance of remembering what they told you rather than if you were just sitting by and scrolling. So I think there's a pro and con both in that. Me personally, I like to be updated on what's going on in the world. And I don't really necessarily like that from the news, because the news, I feel like, sometimes can be biased and sometimes can be a lot of negativity. So I prefer to get my information from my own social medias. Now, I think deleting every social media you have and going dark off the internet, off the grid, if you will, I think that's a bit extreme. Because every person is different and they may not use every app to the most extreme. For example, Visco. It got very popular right around the Hydro Flask era, which would have been, 2016, something like that? Let's look it up. When did Visco get popular? 2019. Wow, was I way off. 2019. So, I didn't get Visco, I think, till 2021. But it's an app where I'll go on to post some quote-unquote aesthetic photos that I like. And it's oftentimes always linked in people's Instagrams. It is linked in mine. But it's not necessarily toxic. You can't really talk to people. I think you can comment on stuff kind of now, but you don't really talk to people. The likes don't really show up. You can repost other people's stuff. It's very simple, but it's also not something I scroll on for hours. I'm probably on it like 10 minutes a week max, where I'll go on, maybe if I have something to post or edit, or I just want to see what other people are doing. It's a few scrolls and then I'm done. Something like that, I wouldn't really need to delete that. I don't think it's really an issue in my life. And maybe you feel the same way about some other apps. But something like TikTok, I spend a lot of time on it. I think deleting it, I don't think it would be the end of the world. Instagram, which I'm not on a ton, but I still, it's probably second in command for time I've spent on it. But I think I could get news from Instagram and what's going on from Instagram as well. But at the end of the day, I think deleting all social media is not the best solution. I think there's ways to manage it, as we've spoken about, setting timers or setting certain limits and giving the password to a friend. I think there's ways to manage it without deleting everything. Now, one thing I want to talk about also is Snapchat. Actually, also, I couldn't really delete every social media platform because, for example, Facebook, I spoke about how I, used it in my musical, and we used that for communication. So I really couldn't have deleted that. Now, the last thing I want to talk about kind of goes in hand with something I wanted to say about Facebook as well, but I was holding off about Snapchat. The reason I don't think I could ever delete Snapchat is there are people that I talk to on there that either don't like messages, so they don't use messages and they use Snap, or people that I might only have on Snap and not their number. And obviously, I don't talk to people in Instagram DMs. That's kind of an unspoken rule, unless, like, I don't know, maybe they don't have Snap or something, or you need to get their number, or you briefly talk to them or something. You don't really continually talk to people in Instagram DMs, I feel like. But I think Snap is like some place that I have only certain people on. So I wouldn't really want to delete that because it is a form of communication, and it is a big part in, losing contact with certain people if I were to delete it. And I think that goes back to the question about how staying in touch with social media is such a benefit of life nowadays. So I think deleting Snap would be very hard. Now, I think there's aspects of Snap that aren't needed. For example, like streaks, if you're just sending pictures to somebody back and forth a day. I never really understood that. Do I do it? Absolutely. I'm so guilty of it. Like, I'll be snapping my best friends all day, and maybe it's like just a picture of my face, but like, I don't know why I feel that need to respond, especially when we're not talking about anything, but I do. And I think I'm at a place where I need to kind of figure out why that is. And maybe I'll get back to you guys about how that's going, because some people I don't even talk to, but I just snap for streaks because you can mass snap. I don't understand why I do that, but I do. So, my verdict on that is, for me, I don't think it would be the best idea to delete all social media. Could I delete some? Sure. Maybe this has inspired you to go and delete something, because if you need a change in your life, go ahead. So hopefully this inspired you. Last question. Does social media make your life better? How and why? This is also a loaded question. Why I saved it for the end. I think it makes my life better in certain aspects that we've already talked about. For example, staying in touch with friends and family that, when I go off to school, it's really easy to call them and stay in touch. I think it makes life worse sometimes because it often can make you feel drained. It can cause eye strain. It can waste a lot of time, take away time from other things, take away time from other people. And I think that is always such a hard thing to wrap my head around. But it's true. And I think that is one thing that doesn't make life better. But there's also a lot of things where, videos that are really funny will be posted, and, they really just make my day. Or, for example, maybe I see a video about, I don't know, a new word, and maybe it sparks my imagination to, what's that word mean? So I go up and Google that word, and boom, I learn a new word. And I think it's the little things like that that maybe make you smarter. So overall, does social media make my life better? No. I don't think it makes my life better, but I think it enhances certain parts of my life. I think my life would be fine without social media. I think everybody could survive without social media. In fact, 30, 40 years ago, we did survive without social media. We didn't even have the internet, so it's possible. But I think it is a life enhancer, and that is what a lot of apps do now, They're not meant to really, make you have a better life. They're made to make your life easier. literally dating back to a washer and dryer. Like, you'd used to have to hang it on the clothesline and wash it in a bucket. But then machines came about in the industrial age, and now we have a washer and dryer. And people thought it was insane when it first came out. Why would you want to do that? What would you have taught? Like, you would do that, but like, what would you do with all the extra time? And in that time, women primarily stayed in the household, and that was their jobs. So, they thought, what are we going to do around the house if there's no clothes to do, and we just pop them in the washer and dryer? But look at it now. It's such a standard where, yeah, it's just a normal thing. And that's what social media is becoming. It's just a normal thing. Everybody pretty much has it. If you don't have it, you're kind of out of the loop. And it's such a hard statement to say, but you really are if you don't have it. You're behind the times, or you're certainly not ahead, but a lot of people are behind the times. And if you don't have it, that's completely okay. But the world looks at it now where it's just almost a necessity. But I still believe it enhances certain parts of our life. And doesn't make it better as a whole, no. But it enhances it because maybe it makes us laugh. All right, I think that's all I have for today. I was a little bit worried about recording this because I don't have Ben, and sometimes when my brain gets a little foggy and muddled up, I'm like, Ben's there to, continue the conversation. I can take a breather. But I didn't really have this. And if you hear me yawning or taking a drink, it is because it's really late. And I somehow need to get this uploaded in about an hour, so it is out for Thursday. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Maybe you took something from it. Maybe it's going to change your social media habits. But make sure you go follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on Instagram. That is where we post all our updates. And there is going to be more updates now because we're getting back into the swing of things. And we have these individual episodes, which are really easy to do because we don't really need to schedule time to both be together. So make sure you follow that. And thank you for listening, as always. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And make sure you remember, social media, it doesn't make our lives better. Maybe it makes talking to people easier, but it enhances our lives. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Peace.